All right. Everybody, I think we'll reconvene the meeting, bring it back into order. Before we broke for lunch, we were discussing the budget requests from the Animal Disease Diagnostic Lab. So I'd like to, restart the discussion as far as those requests. And I think it's appropriate that we probably look at this in two different tracks. One, the budgetary ask for the annual recurring base, and then also thrown in with that the preventative maintenance and repair and rehabilitation funding, and then separate to that the capital request for either renovation of or replacement of the laboratory spaces. And I know the capital request was not on the agenda, so I know that's new to some of you, but our timeline that we need to have these submitted is August 14th. So if we can come to consensus on things today, that's wonderful. If not, we'll need to have a special board meeting before the 14th to come to a decision on that. Now, I understand since this wasn't originally on the agenda, you may not have spoken with all of your stakeholders and constituents, and might need to get feedback from them. But, we'll try and get as much of this done as we possibly can today.
So are you needing a motion? Well, after hearing what was presented earlier and being familiar with the ADDL because I use it, and knowing as you referenced earlier about the age of facilities and what have you, and having appreciation for what is required for elevating the lab to that tier 1 status. I would propose that those who make the request for certainly funding the capital project at the 148 million amount that was proposed in, also funding the increase in the yearly appropriation.
Okay, so that would, Dr. Ragland, could I perhaps get you to make those as two separate motions? But I believe you were talking about having funding the replacement of the ADDL lab in West Lafayette as one, and then the fiscal year 28 and 29 requests funded at the level that Dr. Hendricks proposed.
That is correct.
Okay. I entertain a second, and at that point we can have discussion. Second. Okay. Now we'll open it up for discussion.
Don't we need to do the regular budget request separately from the capital budget?
Yes, that would be helpful.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which one do we want to discuss first?
I'm supportive of the regular budget request, getting as presented and getting that submitted. Do they want you to submit a capital budget at the same time? Or
At the
what kind of
time-
guidance have they given you on
The
the capital
timeline's the
budget?
same, but it's a separate ask.
Uh-huh.
So you can do one, or, yeah, so
And you're just submitting it to the budget committee?
the budget agency.
The budget
puts it
agency.
together.
Who
for-
do you work with there, or who does it go to?
Well, we have a budget analyst, but it goes into it goes to the budget agency who's putting it together. So it'd be the budget director and the OMB vertical now, and they're pulling all that together. So it's an online form that I have to fill out, provide all the details. They answer all, if they have questions, they'll come back and ask questions and so forth.
But the guidance they've given you to this point,
Correct.
you've addressed that and met that in the budget, as far as the regular budget.
Well, I haven't put anything in for ADDL yet, but I will based on whatever you all do today. But yeah, if you approve what we'll call the operating and the preventive maintenance and the R&R as presented by Dr. Hendricks today, I can start putting that in the system. Keep that moving.
If you want to separate the requests, I'll go ahead and make a motion to approve just the regular budget submission as presented.
I think that is in order to separate the two requests.
Need a second?
Yeah, please.
Okay. We have two main motions out. I don't want to get.
My parliamentary procedure is a few years behind me on this all council's approval.
I have not read Robert's rules.
Yeah.
I think you could table the
Yeah,
first.
I think
amended
we
version.
should table Dr. Ragland's original motion for a moment. Get this off the. Dr. Ragland, are you all right with that?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
So now we're discussing the motion on the.
Discussing the motion on the budget request for fiscal 28 and 29, the operating expense, and then the preventative maintenance and repair and rehabilitation funding for the animal disease diagnostic lab. As presented by Dr. Hendricks.
That makes sense.
Okay.
So
Any other comments or questions? All right. Gary, call the roll, please.
Question is, on the approval of the ADDL 2829 annual budget request as presented by Dr. Hendricks for operating expense for maintenance and care and rehabilitation. Keith Beard,
Yes.
Virgil Bremer,
yes.
Brad Fisher,
Yes.
Dr. Hafner,
Yes.
Dr. Hall,
yes,
Dr. Hartwell,
Yes.
Ty Harberger,
Yes.
Larry Hopkins,
Yes.
Dr. Ragland,
Yes.
and Dave Hart.
Yes. All right. Now, if that's passed, I think we'll bring back to discussion Dr. Ragland's motion to fund a capital building request for a new ADDL space on the West Lafayette campus. So open that back up for discussion on the board.
So, yeah, I look at this from the standpoint of, we just recently had, new hospital facilities built in and now occupied at the vet school. And I joined the faculty in 99, and I can recall at that time discussions about the need for new facilities. And the fact of the matter is, these buildings, for what happens in them, there's a lot of wear and tear. And just get to a point where they need replaced. for the activities that, you know, taking place, if they're not constantly renovating, then it seems like you get to a point where, you need what amounts to new space. And, given, Dr. Akey, when he came, I, you know, met with him and he talked about, you know, what makes a tier 1 diagnostic system, what have you. And so I'm full aware of the BSL-3, need for BSL-3, you know, facility to be able to get to the point. And I think that it's probably just time, you know, to consider, you know, what is new space, and what is the anticipated ends that building or that facility might see going forward. So I think it's just time.
Is there ever an opportunity for another quote on this building? I mean, 150 million is a lot.
I would propose that we
No?
send a delegation to meet with somebody from the governor's office, the House and Senate budget writers, and talk to them about the need and the options of, you know, the two facilities, the new one at SIPAC and the renovation versus, well, basically option 1 versus option 2 versus maybe an option 3 of doing 2 regional facilities, and get some feedback before we submit a $150 million capital budget request. Now, I don't know, maybe if you guys have had those discussions from OMB, or if do they have any idea this would, I'm just, from experience, if you submit a number like that without some preliminary discussion, it's going to be.
The answer is no, because we were waiting on the information today to kind of know that.
I guess I wouldn't want to submit a capital expenditure request cold like that without some preliminary discussion and sort of laying out the options to them and get some feedback first. I know you're up against a tight time frame to submit the number, and you can always submit it and, you know, have follow-up discussions before they start meeting next January, but it seems like it would still be a good idea to at least have whoever you deal with from the governor's office, have a discussion with that person and let them know what we're looking at.
Larry, I think there's, any request would be paired with a, you know, like you said, meetings with the holders of the purse strings. You know, that I don't foresee this as, I mean, you know, there will be some, I don't like to use the word lobbying, but lobbying, you know, to make the case for why that this is a very necessary thing for the animal agricultural industry and companion animal industry, and you know, just the overall economic benefit for the state of Indiana. You know, and I think that's for this group to discuss how best we want to do that. I see Becky nodding her head over there. Do we have any stakeholders?
Yeah, I definitely have some thoughts.
Okay.
I mean, I think you're right. You know, anything like this is going to take a fair amount of you know, coordinated push. I don't think we want to do that push in the form of offering up a suite of options to the administration or to legislators. I think once everybody has coalesced around what the official ask is going to be, that's the first time it gets shared outside of, you know, the industry groups and the Board of Animal Health. That would be my opinion. I don't think you want to put options on the table until everybody's in concert about what they want to push for. I think in a situation like this, you know, by the way we route budget requests now, in Indiana, we've eliminated that issue of maybe it not ranking high enough in Purdue's priorities to get full-throated support. But doing it this way, we're still at a disadvantage that it may not have the governor's. And so that means that the Board of Animal Health might not be able to lend its full-throated support to the project, which means the burden to do that then is all on the industry groups to do that. And that means that it's lobbying the administration to make sure it can be something that's supported by the administration and by BOAH. And then it's lobbying the legislature to make sure it gets in the budget. I think that, well, I know, because I've talked to our policy committee, that Indiana Pork is supportive of a capital ask from ADDL. But it has to be the appropriate ask. I also know that Indiana Pork has given me leave to lobby for a capital request that is maybe outside of what Purdue would support. So I have that flexibility as well. But what remains is there has to be something that has some chance of success, and we have to know that what we're proposing is right sized to what Indiana needs. And I don't know that we have enough info, and again, an oversimplification, I know, but just based on, yearly testing volumes of what other states are getting for those numbers that they've spent elsewhere, and then what we would actually need in Indiana based on our relative size, and like David said, what business we might be able to claw back. And so we don't know, I don't feel like industry knows yet if the $148 million ask is the right ask, or if it's more of, the remodel plus satellite labs. I do know that it's likely that the way the motion was phrased as just the $148 million ask, that it's very unlikely that poultry would support that ask because it doesn't address the Hiki lab scenario at all. And and poultry is an essential component of pushing something like this forward because they have to be there with full throat support they ask. And so that right there, is an issue. What I would like to see is more info on how sampling numbers and size of lab matches up to some of those other states that got mentioned in the presentation. Give the industry groups a chance to digest that, because we're going to be the ones that are mostly going to be lobbying for it. And then at that point, we can come back and lobby this board for what the industry groups think they want. And you can take that information and take it or leave it, but at least you have the info of kind of where our official position would be as the groups that are going to have to be pushing for it, and then come back, at a separate meeting to discuss that specifically, knowing the direction that we can coalesce around and support. So at least you have that, that full view going into the discussion.
May I add to that?
Yes, Becky, please.
So I'm president of the Indiana State Poultry Association. Certainly you can see by the long disease incident that we have been in, we are very dependent and appreciative of ADDL. At our ISPA board meeting in early June, we had enough information from our April 30th ADDL advisory committee meeting, and we have a number of representatives that are also board members. We had a pretty good conversation about this, and the full board was in support of pushing as hard as we could to get really whatever we truly need to take us to that point where, when we look at the size and the consequence of just poultry in the state, and we look at where we rank nationally, #1 in ducks, #3 in eggs, #4 in turkeys alone, plus more. And I've just run an economic impact study, and it's just under $7 billion just from our animals alone, just from our poultry companies, not all the other things added. So we are ready and prepared to go and advocate where we need to, but we need and appreciate the opinion and support of the Board of Animal Health. I mean, we look to you as the group that helps make decisions and provide that direction. As we know what poultry wants and needs, but we know we're in the barnyard, and we need to cooperate there. So, but we are fully supportive of whatever is identified as the true need here. And to add to, we have several poultry companies that are very reliant on that Kiki lab in southern Indiana. They have been waiting a long time and have offered money and support for just a completely new lab down there over many years. And we think, and Dr. Marsh made some great points. I mean, you have that satellite lab is in an area that's generally underserved, hard to get to places. It takes a lot to get yourself to West Lafayette. And so we very much support that one. Would want to see at least that satellite lab as part of an ask. Also very interested in the potential for a northeastern Indiana lab. But I think at a minimum, making sure that Purdue lab at West Lafayette is what it needs to be, and a new Kiki.
Just to kind of segue off of what Becky was saying, yes, we in Poultry are very much supportive of this. $148 million is a little bit of a sticker shock for sure, especially when you see other states and it's more than double. One concern I have with that is with this being a public forum, the 148 million is going out there. Then when people bid on it, they have a number that's already been approved, right? So it's almost like if I have $100,000 in my pocket and I want to buy a new tractor and I say, hey, how much is that? I got $100,000 in my pocket. How much is that tractor? It's going to happen. So I hope we do our due diligence, looking for building a new lab and all that. It's all been noted, the needs of this. This started coming out in 2021 as Dr. Hendricks put the timeline on there. And we're already 2026, and there's a part of it where it was said we almost had to get something out there from the industry group to start getting the ball rolling. The ball, as it rolls, may take a few different shapes and everything, but at least it gets rolling. And that's kind of my thoughts on it.
Any other comments from other members of the board? I guess as I'm hearing this, there's definite support for needing to do something, but maybe a little bit of information that we're lacking could be brought to the table, and then give the other stakeholders some time to coalesce around this and go forward with a unified ask. So I think right now, if we look at probably, unless I hear dissent, tabling this, coming back here for a special meeting for the 14th, so we can make the budget request in a timely fashion, because I think it's important. And Josh, to your point, I think it's best that we move forward with one ask. Larry, no disrespect, but I always hate negotiating against myself by giving somebody a cheaper option to go with, because that's what they're always going to pick. So I think that's the route we're going to go at this point in time, and then just in the interest of kind of keeping today's meeting moving along. So we can, are there specific asks for information from ADL and the vet college to bring back to the group besides what's already been discussed? Unless, like I said, there's any dissent, we'll go ahead and consider this motion tabled for right now, and we will move on to Dr. Whirling's presentation for animal program.
thank you for the opportunity to present on behalf of the Animal Programs Division. Really appreciate a few minutes, sorry to make you have to turn around. Before I provide kind of an overview or highlight a few items from the full report that's in your materials, I just want to take the opportunity to provide a couple introductions. One of them being Dr. Justine Chaley. I know she was introduced when Gary gave his report, but I wanted to give her just an opportunity to provide just a little introduction of herself to all of you, so you kind of know our newest District 8 field veterinarian on the team, who just joined us last Monday. So she's been with us exactly a week and a day. So just wanted to give her a minute or so to just provide you a little bit about her and her background, so that you have a little information to go with her name and face.
Hi, Kelly told me to do an elevator speech. I'm Justine Shaley. I'm really excited to be here and to serve in District 8. It's a really amazing opportunity to be here, so I appreciate that. Where I'm from, I hail from Columbus, Indiana. I'm a proud Purdue Vet School alum. And also my husband is proud Purdue Vet alum, so he's a small animal practitioner in Columbus, owner. And I joined BOAH just last week. We have 3 young daughters. It's a busy household, but as far as my experience goes, I have over 8 years of small animal and exotic private practice experience, and then I also most recently came from Indiana University working for that. So I'm really happy to be here and serve, and appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Okay, so next, I wanted to also give the opportunity for our summer student interns to be able to provide you all with a little snapshot of what their internship experience has been like thus far. So I'm going to yield the floor to the 2 of them and allow them to kind of take it from here. And then after that, we'll provide a couple other high-level overview items from the division.
Good afternoon, everyone. Hopefully this is a little more exciting than numbers and budget. Feel free to take your after lunch nap while we present, no hard feelings. I'm Megan Ashby. I come from Carroll County, Indiana. I recently graduated from Purdue undergrad in animal sciences, and this fall I will be beginning my veterinary school at Purdue University and hope to track mixed animal practice with the preference for our kids.
Hi everyone, my name is Will Eberhardt. I'm the other veterinary intern for the summer for BOAH. I'm from Greenwood, Indiana. I also just graduated with a bachelor's in animal sciences from Purdue. I'll also be starting veterinary school at Purdue in August.
Bravo.
Thank you. Hoping to practice anatomical pathology.
So this is just a quick overview of some of the things we had the opportunity to do this summer. Second weekend, we started with high-path AI environmental sampling and biosecurity compliance auditing, which is really interesting to understand not just, the breakout of an epidemic, like, so the steps that happen, 5, 6, 10 steps down the road that we have to continue sampling and making sure things are recovering the way that they should.
Yep. Next, we started to go around with some of the animal health specialists with their inspections and some of the services that they do around Indiana. So we went to the cremation services. Homeward Bound was the cremation site that we went to, mostly focusing on the carcass disposal aspect of it, as incineration is one of the valid methods. So going, one, just to see what that facility looks like, but also ensuring that they're having safe practices, doing what they're telling us that they are for carcass disposal, and then making sure that all of these practices are taken cleanly and there's enough sanitation and good process handling throughout these procedures.
And then I had the opportunity to visit into a red wolf sanctuary. So if you remember from, I think, two or 3 years ago, the interns that summer got to play with some wolf puppies. And I got to meet those wolf pups that have now grown up into adults. So that was kind of a cool full circle. We actually were there officially for the cervid surveillance program. They have one elk on the property named Clara. So we laid eyes on her, made sure she was being taken care of and contained properly. But that was interesting to see. They have many different animals kept there at the sanctuary.
After that, we had a professional development day with Indiana Beef. So we went to their office up around Keystone, and it was a group event with a bunch of different agricultural companies and organizations around the state. And then they sent their interns for everyone to kind of meet each other, network, and then work on every kind of professional development aspect that a lot of interns have. So things like Indiana Farm Bureau, a lot of the other big finance and communication companies in agriculture. BOAH was probably one of, if not the only, animal agriculture interns that were there. So we were kind of a little unique sector. So we did things like personality testing, learning to look at what kind of personality types other people have in a workplace and how you work with those. And then things like social media and LinkedIn and using those to kind of boost your professionalism and your resume, networking skills, stuff like that. So
We also did a community service project there, which was packing meals to be delivered, which is why we're all in earnets.
next after this, we chatted along with the humane handling audits with Dr. Swikowski. So we went to a meat processing plant up in northwest Indiana, kind of an hour north of Purdue, and making sure that we were looking at the humane handling before and during the slaughter process. So from the holding pens before then, leading them into things like the chutes, and then the actual knocking and stunning processes. So whether that be electric, bolt guns, stuff like that, making sure that they do it well, they do it with conviction. We don't want misstuns. We don't want anything that's not a humane handling or euthanasia method. Then making sure that the entire kind of process is cleanly, full, and humane. I was a little partial to this as a former butcher. So I really, really like this one. This is one of my favorites. But it was very interesting to see how this happens at a bigger facility, kind of scaled up.
I also got the opportunity to help with boiler vet camp, and BOAH's part in that was at the Indianapolis Zoo, so that was fun. And the station that I helped with was biosecurity, which I had some experience putting on PPE through the high-path AI thing, so that was fun, watching the kids also struggle with the Tyvek suits and the gloves and everything else. So that was a really fun experience, and then we also had some time to kill, so the BOAH Central Office team got to go to the zoo. It's always a good day at the zoo, right? And then we did some tuberculosis testing with Dr. Chavis up in Fort Wayne area, yeah. And so these were hundreds of dairy beef cattle that were about to be shipped to Canada. And so we were on site for any secondary TB testing that needed to be done. And then we also got to practice the primary TB testing, which is the middle image right there, feeling the suspect. So that was really fun. The calves were really friendly. You can see in the bottom right corner. One of them was really trying to convert Will to a large animal better.
Yeah. One of the other facilities that we went to, and one that's also kind of been talked about today, is the SciPac Center. So the Southern Indiana Purdue Center down near Jasper. So we toured that entire facility along with the PQ Lab and their version of the ADDL, and then all the other grounds as well. So things like their goat herd, their cattle herd, kind of all of the research parts that they do there. So seeing both of us have had the opportunity to see West Lafayette's ADDL and seeing kind of the comparison between them, what the big differences are, kind of when it comes to limitations, especially being in a more remote area, age of the building, things like that was very interesting to see. We did find it very interesting that they actually do more numbers of necropsies and testing, stuff like that, as well as getting to talk to their pathologist was very eye-opening to see kind of some of the problems that they have, how they work through that, and how they kind of still put out their production output. So it's very interesting to see how the research capabilities of that differ from Purdue's. So the Purdue animal research kind of focuses more on nutritional behavior studies, while a lot of what SciPac does, at least the way it was conveyed to us, seems to be a lot more environmental and researching the surroundings. So I really, really enjoyed this.
They were also preparing for an extension day. That was the following day, so producers were going to come out and learn some things. And so we got to be the guinea pigs on some of their little lectures. So we learned a lot about soils and poisonous weeds, which is not something I ever expected to learn about with a BOAH internship.
In the same vein of kind of government labs and government facilities, we also toured the IDOH with Dr. Renshaw. So when we were at SciPac, the pathologists were explaining to us kind of how the rabies testing works, the collections for that, kind of who has jurisdiction, if who can decide, yes, this is definitively rabies. So we learned that while SciPac can kind of do some of those collections, maybe initially look at it, IDOH is the only lab that's able to definitively say that, yes, this is rabies. So we toured there, also throughout all of their labs, kind of biology, chemistry, radiation testing kind of labs. So being able to see what happens under the entire One Health mantra. So seeing how human health, animal health, kind of general wildlife health all comes into one thing. So very interesting to see that. One thing that I thought was really interesting that I hadn't really considered before this internship was the STI and STD testing of incarcerated people. So, I mean, after it was explained, it seems kind of obvious, but I didn't think, oh, that's something that's super common. So that was a very, very big job in their lab, was getting through all of those tests. So very interesting to learn about all their biosecurity levels. They were able to go all the way up to biosecurity level 4. So it was very interesting to see the steps that are taken and needed to be able to handle pathogens at that level.
And then just last week, actually, we got to go to the Shelbyville racetrack with Dr. Chavis and do a behind-the-scenes tour. And she actually had a gelding that was racing that day, and we got to watch that race, and he won it, so we got to be in the winning as well. I have a video of the sisters jumping up and down, so that was fun. But we also got to ride in the chaser truck with the veterinarians. I never expected to go that fast on a racetrack in a truck. We were drifting around the curves. And then we got to follow Sterling the horse to the testing facility to see how they do those tests and what the chain of evidence is for that and how they keep that solid so that nobody can say, well, you switched the samples or that's not accurate. So that was a facet of regulatory medicine I had never even considered before. It was very interesting to get to see behind the scenes. They have 3 veterinarians on staff at the racetrack at all times, and then they also have separate veterinarians for the animal or the horse associations in the barns, which was an interesting distinction.
Next, again, former butcher, always fun when I get to get into things. So this was another one of my favorites, the USDA scraping facility. So we went with Dr. Trainer and Dr. Whirling up there near Purdue to see how the scraping facility does their testing and their collection, as well as me and Megan then proceeded to do the collections for all of the heads that they had that day. So they had about 20, 25. So we went, learned from the worker there, kind of his career history, how he set up that lab to work efficiently for him. And then he showed us the collection sites and how we're actually supposed to get those samples, and kind of turned us loose and allowed us to do that for ourselves. So very hands-on at this lab. It was very, very fun to get to do that. So doing the lymph node and OBEX collections on these heads and making sure that we don't accidentally smash a sample when we're getting it out is a very good fine motor skill that we got to practice. So.
Also last week, we got to go to the Fort Wayne Zoo with Dr. Chavis. She knew of the veterinarians that work behind the scenes there, and so she allowed us to observe them for the morning. They actually did a dental extraction on a mongoose, which was really cool to watch. We learned that to anesthetize a mongoose, you basically have to gas it in a box and then intubate it. She also showed us the dart gun that they have in the bottom right corner for dangerous animal escapes and how that works. And then other BOAH, friends of BOAH allowed us a behind the scenes tour. We got to feed the giraffes, which was fun. You can see Dr. Chavis reaching to feed the male, and tour through the zoo. So they showed us in the top left corner, those are hellbenders. And so they're working with the DNR to do a hellbender release to help repopulate them in the wild. I think they're releasing about 200 in the next month or so. And then the backyard boxes just had kids. So they were talking about how they care for those without, disrupting the. So that was a very interesting experience to understand and contemplate, how do you care for mongooses that hide in the ground, you know? And then, actually just yesterday, we were doing dairy inspections with Sarah. So we went to Prairie Farms, Nestle, and then a small creamery in Sheridan. So this was Prairie Farms. We took all of the samples back and brought them to IDOH to have them tested, and then they gave us a tour of the facility. And so that was the warehouse. Those are just pallets of chocolate milk bottles. So those are my dad's favorite. I had to show up where his chocolate milk came from. And then this was us testing at Nestle. Will is doing a temperature control in that one as they pull the milk samples from the bulk tank. They pulled cream and 2% whole milk, raw milk, all of the main tanks. And then that was another little Jersey cow at Dandy Breeze, really trying to convert Will to be a large animal vet.
Still resisting for now.
So that was really interesting. Sarah did a really good job of showing us a really small operation and then a medium size and a very large operation, as Nestle is completely automated. And their workers pretty much just watch the lines and the printers.
So another thing we did in addition to all of our field work this summer that you guys just saw was we did a lot of welfare cases. So they're not all up here. A lot of these have a lot more background to them that will take up way too much of the time for this meeting. So we did them with a lot of the regular companion animal species as well as some large animals. So we did a horse welfare case with Dr. Nibbs, which is just a very easy, short one to explain. So they had a lot of really skinny horses. People were seeing from the road. They kept getting complaints. And then as more complaints came in, the owners then moved the horses to the back so that you couldn't see them at all. So we went out with her, helped handle and examine these horses, and it was very interesting, especially as future veterinary students, to be able to kind of put forth, oh, we think it's this body condition score and learn whether that's right, that's wrong, maybe it's kind of in the middle, be able to kind of initially practice those skills of kind of visually observing these animals. Then we did the same thing with a lot of other cases, a lot of these neglect and wooding cases. So cats, dogs, the one with Dr. Macy had some horses and then food animal as well. So very interesting to see how the steps change when it comes to different species.
And then in helping with those welfare cases, we helped with the documentation of them as well. And we learned from the field vets that that's kind of the stop flow in working these cases, is that it takes a lot of time and effort to write up these 50-page reports about the conditions that they found in the animals in. And so we helped do some of that documentation of just, you know, what notes the doctors wrote as we were doing the examinations. And then we're actually meeting later this week to talk about developing some reporting materials and templates that could potentially help them report in an easier or faster manner and give them some tools to help speed up that process.
And then, so that's kind of a small project that we're working on for the next couple of weeks until we're done with the internship. But one that we did under the direction of Dr. Shipman was this salary comparison project. So we talked a lot about money and budgeting today, kind of an ever-looming issue in almost every single facet of life. But we kind of worked to assess the level of pay disparity within the agency and then comparing that to other state boards of animal health kind of in our USDA region. So all the way from Pennsylvania up near the Dakotas and then down to Kansas, kind of that triangle. We assessed all of those states within that, both for vet, non-vet, and then roles that have leadership and non-leadership. So looking at every single job that the Indiana Board of Animal Health has, comparing that to all these other states. So we did min and max for roles that had that applicable. So like the state vet's not going to have that, but things like meat inspectors, there's minimum and maximums based on how long someone's been there. And then making midpoints for all of these values and comparing that in a percentage and a straight flat value versus Indiana. And then from this, we ranked all of these roles to kind of assess how low does Indiana stand or how high do we stand in some of these roles. So we blocked up the numbers on this one, but 4 state meat inspectors. Out of all of these states, we ranked 10th in our midpoint. So on the lower end for a lot of these roles. And then we did this for probably 15, 20 positions, 10 positions. And then proceeded to aggregate all that data, which I will let Megan explain.
So in using all 10 rankings, Unfortunately, 5 of the states do not actually have meat inspection programs. They utilize USDA inspectors. So that, I was just gonna average the ranks and be like, here's where we stand, but it didn't calculate out quite right. So I did this kind of complicated, I called it a mega rank, but weighted salary reverse average sort of calculation to figure out where we stand in comparison to these 13 other states. Unfortunately, we do not stand very high. So we're from this ranking about 13 out of 14. And that is that green bar clef map up there. As you can see, the surrounding states are in the top 4, which does not bode well for comparative hiring. And then in that bottom pink graph is just cost of living. So if you wanted to say, well, of course Illinois is higher because they have a higher cost of living, it doesn't necessarily shake out that way. It was interesting how it kind of tiered out, that there's a top tier, a middle tier, and a bottom tier. But I think a more important question to ask is there anything that these top states are doing that we're not doing? Personally, after observing BOAH for however many weeks, I don't think the answer is anything significant. I think we're a pretty strong Board of Animal Health in what we do. We could be more competitive in our compensation, I guess. So that was the overall summary of what we found.
And then kind of from here, the future things that we're going to be doing. We've been assisting with the herd papers and kind of approving and reviewing those this entire summer. So we're going to continue with that, but kind of the other field days we have planned for the rest of the summer. We have a bird handling and training tomorrow with the Indiana Gaming Commission, kind of with helping bust the cockfighting rings, making sure that when they actually come in, that the people are properly handling the training with these birds. Then we have breeder broker kennel tours, a hunting preserve inspection with Dr. Chavis, and then dairy farm inspections with people in the dairy division.
And all that to say, thank you to everyone who has allowed us to shadow them on their days of work and let us come along, met us all over the state. Thank you today for your time and letting us just like this. Hopefully it wasn't too much of a boring snooze fest, but we will let you get back to your regular agenda. I just wanted to say, I appreciate this. So,
Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you both for that presentation. I know we on the board appreciated that because it lets us know that all the field staff are actually out there doing their job, documenting it. So thank you.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate, thank you to the board for continuing to support us having student interns over the summer. It's very valuable, not only I think for them, I think everyone walks away with a good experience, but also for us, right? They're doing some current duties for us that we've had some vacancies in our division since the beginning of the summer that we absolutely would not be able to do without their help. Even with the minutia of data entry, it's really important around here, as you know, with what we do, and they've been a huge help in that piece, as well as having the opportunity to see the depth and breadth of what we do at BOAH in the field, as well as some of the less glamorous things that we have to do, but really appreciate them being able to be here. So thank you for your support with that. Just a couple other items, and then I will yield the floor again to the next speaker, but you do have the full division report in your read ahead materials. Just a couple items I wanted to pull out and highlight from an overall division level. So as is, I'm sure, going to be mentioned by others, so I won't belabor it too much, but did just want to mention, June 3rd, New World screwworm was diagnosed for the first time in the United States. We have been fortunate not to have diagnosed it or detected it, I guess I should say, since it's a pest and not a pathogen, in Indiana. However, we have been receiving and screening a decent amount of suspect concerned looking maggots being sent to us and or images of said maggots or larvae being sent to us. So just wanted to mention that we are engaged in that process. We are alert and trying to make sure we do our due diligence, not to miss it if it were to get here and to detect it. So Denise and the communications team put together an online suspect reporting form that allows individuals from our website to be able to report, suspicious looking larvae or flies. We're focusing more on larvae at this point, and allow them to upload not just information of where they found it, what animal or location they found it on, an animal or wound, but also provide images to us that we're able to kind of screen those preliminarily and determine next steps moving forward on kind of that investigative piece. So we've done 13 of those as of yesterday, just since June, I don't know, like 8th or 9th when we launched the suspect reporting form. So we're staying busy trying to make sure New World Screwworm does not, get here, but if it gets here, we detect it soon and quickly and can hopefully address it. So wanted to mention that in my report, that data, of course, is already outdated because instead of having 25 suspect or total animal cases across the nation, or I guess in 2 states in the nation, there are now 35. I just checked before I came up here to make sure they didn't refresh it because they refresh it every single day. So there are 35 cases located within Texas, and then one of those cases was in a dog in New Mexico, and that one has been kind of considered isolated. So enough about New World Screwworm, unless there are questions. I know that I think Dr. Shipman's going to talk about it a little bit in greater detail afterwards. So wanted to mention that. A couple other items I wanted to share with you. At the last board meeting, I believe I shared with this group that we were going to be changing our national milk testing strategy sampling methodology, I guess. So we have traditionally up until this month been sampling tankers of milk as they're presented at plants before being unloaded. So we have, as of July, for the first time, switched from testing tankers as they're presented at plants to testing silos. So that has kind of changed. We're still participating in the national milk testing strategy. We still have unaffected state status, which is good. We have not detected highly pathogenic avian influenza in milk in the state of Indiana, but we've changed kind of the methodology of how we're collecting those samples. Hopefully in the long run, that will be a little less burdensome process, both for our dairy inspectors that are doing that work. Really appreciate them going out and getting those samples collected and gathered and brought into the office for us, but also in the pre-processing that occurs before we send them to Purdue ADDL for testing. It also decreases that number monthly from about 300 samples to about 35-ish, depending on how many silos have milk in them at the time that we collect the samples. So hopefully that's helpful also from that workforce capacity standpoint. So continuing to do that monthly testing. Did also want to mention, I am happy to report that we have finally closed out a TB trace case that we've had open for several months. This quarter we were able to close that out. Essentially, I believe I've mentioned it before, but we had 48 animals imported into the state of Indiana actually in 2023 from Texas. That Texas origin herd did have a positive tuberculosis animal in that dairy herd. And so we had 48 animals that we had to do follow-up surveillance and testing on, and then also determine what the final disposition of those animals was going to be. At this point, all of those animals have been tested negative, and then have actually gone through advanced slaughter surveillance. So all of those animals are now off the landscape. But that was a bit of a process. The processor could only take about, I think, 5 of those animals at a time. So it was kind of moving 5 animals at a time down the road to go through that enhanced slaughter surveillance. So wanted to mention it though, because it has been something that I think we've mentioned multiple times. We're finally able to close out that TB exposed trace case. Last item I wanted to draw your attention to. So our students provided you with kind of an overview of their experience as it relates to kind of that animal welfare piece. I did want to just mention, and I haven't mentioned it or highlighted it specifically in the last few meetings that we've had, just the number, we always include it in the materials, but just actually highlight verbally the number of welfare cases that our veterinarians and our animal welfare, individual screens for essentially. So this past quarter, we had 188 different animal health welfare related inquiries or complaints come into our office. That is a little high. I don't think it's just perceived, it's actually numerically higher than normal. And those 188 complaints, calls, questions, concerns led to 51 investigations. And so Just over the past quarter, our field veterinarians performed 51 investigations after that initial screening of whether investigation needed to occur for those different complaints and inquiries. And then several of those our students had a chance to kind of chat with you about or provide you information with. I did include the animal programs investigations report, again, in the end, kind of in that chart form. So you can see kind of line by line what animals were impacted species-wise and those types of demographic information. That tended to stay the same. Where those, complaints came from also is provided so that you can kind of see where do we hear from individuals across the state, if it's agencies, if it's private individuals, citizens, those types of things. So any questions I can answer or anything I haven't mentioned from the report that you'd like to hear a little bit more on? Okay, great.
All right.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Dr. Whirling. All right, next up is the avian division, Dr. Cooper. But Dr. Cooper, before you give your report, a little birdie told me that we might be on an anniversary here with you.
Little birdie told me that.
Yes.
Little birdie.
My goodness. I tried.
All right, Dr. Cooper, we're all waiting to hear good news.
Yeah, there is some, but I will start with some, I guess, real-time news. There's some crates of chickens on the ramp from I-80 onto the toll road right now that the truck has long since gone. The interstate's been closed for an hour now because animal control refuses to touch the chicken. I asked if they were white or brown so that we could train here.
Yeah.
I've gotten that answer. Like, come on. So, yeah, that's going on. So Dr. Strasser, who's her father just passed away, is trying to help coordinate this. I'm like, oh goodness. So anyways, it's one of the, I mean, it would be one of the border counties.
Okay.
Lately.
Oh, my goodness.
You missed any, you needed to text anyone, Ty, or? Hopefully they're not.
Bright pink boxes.
So primarily going to focus on our avian influenza outbreak, but there's a couple other mentions as well. I know you guys have had a lot of PowerPoints today. I'll try to get through these very quickly. So just looking first at the national outbreak. On the left-hand side, you can see total cases nationwide, and this is since this outbreak began with us in February of 2022. There have now been 2,235 cases, and that breaks down between that BOAH poultry and BOAH non-poultry, which you can essentially make commercial versus backyard if you want. All 50 states and Puerto Rico have been affected, and 209 million birds affected at this point. Over the past 4 days, or the past 30 days, though, there's just been 4 cases, and that's what the illustration on the right side of the slide is showing. And it's the darkness in color of those states that are highlighted is based on how many birds are affected. So if you're following poultry news, you'll know that Utah got hit with 1.2 million layer facility that was determined to be the B313 serotype, which is from dairy cattle. So that directionality, I just actually looked at the genomic report this morning, was from cattle to poultry. And then Indiana, Pennsylvania, and Idaho all just had backyard cases or small flock cases. So our total cases, and this is since October 9th, so fall 25, and I should say to summer of 26. It's funny, as we have presented this information to folks over the past 9 months. It has gone from fall 25 to winter, 26, and spring 26, now it's summer 26. So our total cases were 153 during that time period. 90 were ducks, either meat ducks or breeder ducks. 52 were layers or pullets. 4 were turkeys. 2 were broiler cases, and 1 species case, and then 4 backyard. And those cases took place in 12 Indiana counties, the vast majority of those, of course, being in Elkhart and LaGrange County, but we had East Central, Southwest, South Central. We were kind of all over the state, really, and even had some Central Indiana small flocks. So our map, and I don't actually have one today that highlights the counties, but we kind of were all over the place with a small staff. It makes it difficult to divide us up and send us into different directions, but we were able to conquer and mostly just had to focus on Elkhart and LaGrange these past few months. It's worth noting that the total birds affected in Indiana was just over 2 million. And so if we looked at our winter outbreak, which was from last January through the beginning of last May, there were only 28 cases, and that affected over 8 million birds. So, so really just the diversity in size and scope of operations that were affected. So we had a lot more large layer complexes back last winter, and this time we had mostly smaller complexes. I think our largest one was just under 100,000, maybe, I can't remember. Yeah, Kelly says yes, so that means yes. So yeah, we dealt with mostly anywhere between 3,000 and 25,000 was kind of our range that was normal for most of those cases. And then, so these are 2 charts. We get them every Friday in our email to kind of indicate where the new cases were. So for the weeks that I chose back in January of 2025, and then a more recent one here in last week, you can see that Indiana's cases back in early 2025, we ranked 23rd in the nation in terms of how many cases we had. And then now we're ranked 2nd and trying not to creep up ahead of Minnesota. So they have 222 cases as part of this outbreak, and we have 198. So we were getting really close. And I said that if we got to LaGrange 100, I was quitting, and we got to LaGrange 97 at this point. So I stand before you still. So our response progress with these 153 cases, depop and disposal is complete at 100% of them. Cleaning is complete at 99%. Actually, cleaning is now 100%. And disinfection will hopefully be 100% in the next couple of days at our last farm. And so those have all, or the ones that have been cleaned and disinfected, have been environmentally sampled, so 99% there as well. And then approved to restock 97, restocked so far are 79. Most of the meat birds have restocked. It's getting pullets into those layer facilities that are taking longer. So after 271 straight days, on July 7th last week, we released the last of our control areas. So we now currently have no control areas across the entire state, and only a handful of premises that remain under quarantine, which will be released when they're approved to restock. And so that over those last 271 days, we generated 12,859 permits. We did 541 BCAP audits, those are biosecurity audits. I think I have, yes, next slide. So in terms of these biosecurity assessments, which include both the wildlife evaluations as well as the domestic bird audits, which can either be mandatory during an outbreak for movement into a control area or for restocking, or they can be voluntary throughout the year if a company or farmer chooses to do so. So for those wildlife biosecurity assessments across the nation, there have been 2,441, and we're 171 of those, or 7% of them, national rank being 4th. The domestic biosecurity audits, so those BCAPs and BIFAs, depending on whether they're mandatory or voluntary. We have done a total, it says 637, that's what's on the dashboard today, but we'll be up over 650 by the end of the week probably. And that is 38% of the entire nation's domestic biosecurity audits. So kudos to Mike Cobb, Chelsea Leatherman, Isaac Trainer for getting all of these done. It's been really a full-time, more than a full-time job for them to do all of these assessments, especially considering the time with which this outbreak has gone on and those audits only being good for 6 months. And we actually, even though we've released all control areas, have to continue doing the renewal BCAP audits for those farms that were previously affected. So if you also then combine the wildlife and the domestic biosecurity audits, we also rank first at nearly 20% of the nation's. Just want to throw this up here as a reminder. So up in Northeast Indiana, our the pedometer or only serotype was tier 1.1. Now, during our outbreak, I think we had 4 or maybe 5 different serotypes. We even had one that was brand new that they named minor something or another, but then found it elsewhere in the country or in flyways, and so ended up giving it a different designation. But we like creating new things here in Indiana. So if you look at the top, these are phylogenetic trees. If you look at the top left, basically that orange is the group within D11 that we were dealing with. And so that orange equates to all the black to the right. So that's just pulling that segment out, the group 2 segment out. And so we've had kind of 3 distinct waves, which I'll show you in another slide, of our outbreak. But the first wave up north was the blue arrow is pointing to where all of those fell on the genetic tree. And everyone kind of thought we kept going with the same outbreak, but indeed in February timeframe, we diagnosed an entirely different strain within that group, within that serotype. So we really did get hit twice. And then our third phase of the incident, we ended up having both strains affecting our poultry populations. And that first one had actually, I don't know that the right word is dormant, but basically was not discovered for 179 days before we picked it up again. So I know this virus likes to hang out and can hang out, for instance, in the soil. References will say up to a year, but you think with the sunshine and everything else that it would not have survived that long, and it sure did. So basically that just means that we're frightened all the time about it reemerging and coming back to bite us again.
And just to clarify that 179 days of that virus was on a positive site that went through the entire cleaning, disinfection, environmental sampling process. And then 179 days later on that exact same site, we found the exact same virus that infected the birds prior, right? So it stuck around somewhere on that site for those 179 days. And there's not a lot of indication looking at genetics that it was in another species and passed back to the birds. It seems as if it was just lingering in the environment, which is, I wouldn't quite go as far to say it's unprecedented, but I don't know that a lot of others have had that similar experience. There was at least, I'll say, 1.5 flocks of birds in these barns in between that time. So birds went to market without becoming impacted, and we don't know what the cause of this kind of reemergence, if you will, on this one particular site. But 179 days, it's definitely unprecedented and can be quite discouraging.
Yeah, Dr. Torchetti at NBSL likes to call these failure of virus elimination, meaning you didn't clean and disinfect well enough. But I mean, an entire flock went through there without getting it. So we obviously cleaned quite well. We did tons of environmental sampling, 250 services in that barn. And I mean, so I'm thinking, it must have hung out maybe in the pasture or driveways or whatever. I mean, I can't imagine driveways had to have some more soil, but yeah, pasture is all I can think about or think of, and then walked it back in. I still wonder if it's possible that it hung out in a peridomestic species and it just didn't have, enough of the markers or change, because, I mean, it's an envelope virus. Once it's outside of the host, it's on its way to dying. And so, 179 days later, that poor producer. And I should note that of our 153 cases, we had 18 total, 16 premises that got infected a second time during this outbreak, and 2 that got affected 3 times.
Since October.
Yeah, since October. So that's extremely discouraging, especially for those 2 producers. Some of them are looking to throw in the towel, I think. Well, one of them is anyways, and I can't blame them. To go through that 3 times, it's a long process. So bless them for staying upright. So these are the 3 waves that I was talking about. Obviously, that first one, particularly in the November timeframe, you can see we had a couple of days where we had, several days, we had 5 or 6 cases in a day. Those are hard to keep up with. That was a ton of work. It's funny because as the mounds, we'll call them, the 3 waves or mounds on the chart, it looks like it would have gotten easier and easier, but the truth is we were so burnt, and so were the companies and producers, that 3rd wave probably felt like worse than the first wave. I mean, it did for most of us, felt worse than the first one, because we had, and I think I speak for myself, but I think many others, like initially you have a lot of adrenaline and it's really keeping you going, but 9 months later, there's just not much left to give. So it was quite a challenge. And here's a different chart. Kyle, I stole this from you, although I'm guessing Isaac did it. So Dr. Trainer, put this together, which shows, so basically what you saw on the last chart of all the positives, that is converted instead of daily to weekly points. So that's the gold bar, are the number of cases that were diagnosed that particular week. And then all the other blue bars are how many control areas we had in place at that time. So, at that peak in November, we had, close to 60 control areas that we were dealing with across the state, which is a lot to communicate to producers and companies and help them keep clear on how many zones they're in and what does that mean for them for every single placement they're making and all of their testing decisions. So just the communication alone is a lot. And then one thing that, and Kyle, you probably have the more specific numbers about how essentially we got more efficient at responding in this case.
Yeah, so if you look at the 3 peaks and kind of the orange leading edge to the blue, so that first peak between the 2 peaks is 4 weeks. The second peak was 3 weeks, and the third peak is 2 weeks. I think that's both becoming more efficient at response from both the regulatory side and the company side, and also due to just fewer cases to respond to, allows you to do that process faster. But we're trying to find silver linings anywhere in here to see that pretty significant change, decreasing in the amount of time between those 2 peaks. It was interesting to once we started, playing with the numbers a little bit, how well, which it intuitively makes sense, but it's hard to predict how long a control area is going to be in place on each individual premises, because it is premises specific on when that control area starts and is completed and how long they can get through that process. But it was quite telling and could give some indication when we could anticipate our highest levels of control area activity and likely permitting associated with them due to just the increased volume kind of heading down the pike there. So we did find that to be, this is very much after the fact. We did not doing this in real time because we just couldn't get there in real time, of how predictive the weekly case counts were in kind of that 2 to 4 week time period to follow.
Yeah, permit volume does follow that to an extent, except for like when hatcheries get thrown in and then suddenly you have a bunch more. permits to do, even if that only accounts for one premises that's brought in, so there's always, it kind of skews it that way, but one question we asked ourselves is, are we moving too fast in some cases? Like, is the natural time that it would take to respond at a slower pace allow time for, you know, that virus to die off, or hang around for 179 days? But, so, I mean, we've definitely considered that. Kyle and I, the week before this, or right before the 4th of July weekend, met with a couple of folks from the state of Victoria and Australia to talk through what their processes are. And essentially they, first of all, the government ends up taking care of almost everything or hiring contractors to do it. But essentially everything is quarantined until the last farm makes it through its process. And that can take months and months. So be glad that we are not in Australia, although, I mean, I think it's, you know, whatever your industry demands is what, you know, we have to do to get things moving. But yeah, we're considering, and we did at one point, and, well, not at one point, in March, up until we released our last control error, actually still, we extended the post-disinfection fallow period that exists for positive farms for those Northeast counties. So instead of 14 days that they have to wait before they can be approved to restock, we changed that to 28 days, hoping that, you know, every day outside of a host, a virus is on its way to dying, and that, you know, that may help us. Now, we don't really know what helped us. To be honest, I was saying this in the lunch line, it feels like we basically, for the last 9 months, kind of contained this to Northeast Indiana, and that was what we did. It doesn't feel like we stamped it out, even though we did. It feels like it fizzled out with the hot weather. And so you look back on all that work and wonder how much it was worth, but I suppose if we did nothing, there would be more of it, and it probably would have headed elsewhere in the United States, so. So yeah, these were the things that we instituted in Northeast Indiana after our kind of March powwow. So we instituted power washing out the outside of barns rather than just cleaning inside, and focusing on ventilation systems, and that was required prior to reaching that first initial virus elimination. We extended that post-disinfection fallow period, like I mentioned. For the restocking biosecurity audits, most of these growers, this is not their full-time job. I would say the vast majority have jobs elsewhere in up there, and then either, you know, spouse and children take care of the birds, or they, you know, take care of them when they get home, and after doing chores in the morning too. So what we found is when we were scheduling these audits is that the growers were not present because they were working, and so we were really just doing these audits with the company, and we felt that there was some value for the farmers to be there, to see the things that we're looking at, to see the deficiencies that we're finding, and also for them to show us that they truly understand a Danish entry type style, and that they know how to, you know, change clothes or put boots on and maneuver over that bench before they enter into the barn. So we changed it so that they needed to be present. For infected zone placements that we made, so that first 3 kilometers or 1.86 miles from infected sites, we limited that and did not allow basically multi-stage in infected zones. And then if you have a multi-stage farm in the buffer zones of those control areas, the poultry that already existed had to have a negative test the day prior to placing them. So that was an additional requirement that wasn't necessarily a part of the secure poultry supply plan. But we have a lot of 2-stage operations up there, and Dr. Ragland impressed upon me during vet school the all-in, all-out flow, and I can't help but think that that's the direction that we need to move. But you know, that's not really the business model that they have up north, nor the infrastructure that they have either. This is just a picture to chat about the Amish community, so who really, by and large, have been phenomenal to work with. But their culture and lifestyle lend some challenges to biosecurity. And so this is actually a farm that was approved to restock last week. They brought in pullets on Friday, and this was Sunday. So they were hosting church, and these were all the Vikings around their barn. And I'm like, well, I hope those were outside of the perimeter buffer area. Probably not. Yeah, so that's kind of what we're up against is, you know, the hosting of events, I think probably was not great for biosecurity and just the amount of interaction that this community has with one another, whether it's at the common workplaces or schools or, you know, hosting what would be weddings, funerals, church, and other events at their homes with lots of other folks. And they rotate that responsibility around. So it's easy to say, you know, no one who has poultry can host these events, but the truth is that so many of them have poultry. And, you know, we're not gonna say don't hold church. I mean, we can't do that and don't want to do that. There may be some protection of religious freedom there, I don't know. Yeah, this is just one example. People sent pictures constantly of things that probably were not going well or right. And I chose to share this one. So just a couple other things, and certainly we can go back if there's time for questions. Chairman Hardin, I'm happy to take them, but just a couple of notes on some other things. So we have experienced a few cases, 4 cases in Indiana of H9N2 influenza. So this is not even really considered low path avian influenza for a lot of areas of the rule because it's not an H5 or an H7. Nonetheless, we certainly wanted to control it so that it didn't reassort with other viruses and or, I mean, it continues to give false results, or not false results, but it continues to give you positive results. So we can't just assume that it's H9. We have to continue to rule out H5 to make sure that it didn't also creep in. So we essentially did almost a controlled marketing. So there was tight biosecurity around these farms. And they monitored them at least weekly, sometimes more often, depending on who was going to be out of the farm, both for antigen and antibody. And so in all, well, I guess I can speak to 3 of the 4 at this point. They all stopped shedding influenza after a couple of weeks, and they all developed antibodies over a period of 2 to 3 weeks. So interesting to kind of follow that, and glad that it didn't seem to hang around longer than that. So 3 of the 4 have been processed, and 1 of them is yet to process, but should be here in a couple of weeks. And there was one of these cases within the same production system, but over in the state of Illinois, and I believe they handled it similarly to us. We've also continued to see a little bit of EDSV in Northeast Indiana layers. Most of the population up there are vaccinated as pullets. What we've run into are independent operators who either go out on their own from an integrator or are new to the region and just don't have a veterinarian who tells them they need to vaccinate for EDSV, because it is, I would say, endemic in Northeast Indiana, and if you're going to raise pullets or layers up there, they've got to be vaccinated, or else they're likely going to get EDSV. So that's the egg drop syndrome virus that causes soft shelled or shellless eggs. Not a lot of mortality, but certainly cuts into their production quite significantly. So, and sometimes it's not noticed initially because when they, depending on the type of operation and how their nest boxes are set up, I mean, when they lay eggs that are jelly like this, I feel like they eat them even quicker, the chickens themselves. So you see the decrease in production of, you know, shelled eggs coming through, but you don't always see all the shellless eggs because they get eaten. So looking forward, you know, we're trying to, we know that, you know, there's going to be an inevitable next time. So we're trying to look at both at what the industry is doing as well as what we're doing at BOAH. Are there things that we're doing that we don't need to? Are there things that we need to do differently? And we have a number of ideas. It's just trying to make sure that those ideas, which may become policies, are kind of in sync with what's even achievable by the industry, and that we're not doing more harm than good. So ISPA is going to, do you want to tell about the task force?
Board of Animal Health, on our June 4th ISBA board meeting, proposed that ISBA put together a task force to help visit with industry and gather some, impressions, thoughts, suggestions, for opportunities for improvement going forward. So at present, I have scheduled that for Friday, June 24th. We'll be up somewhere in either Elkhart or LaGrange County, still trying to nail that down. I've invited the poultry companies that have operations in that area to join. Have a fairly wide-ranging conversation, I think is where we're gonna end up, but I've already have a robust agenda. I would expect that we will continue to meet regularly, looking for at least 4 to 6 months, follow on. So that's.
I will say it is such a challenge because of the diversity of the species that we have up there. So there's no turkeys in Northeast Indiana, but broilers, ducks, and layers and pullets, of course, have different needs and can feel different policies. I don't know what word I'm looking for. Sometimes the policies are more damaging to some production systems or species than others. So it's really challenging to say, hey, this would be a really good idea. It would work well for, the layers, but like the ducks and the broilers could really suffer, or vice versa. So it's a challenging back and forth and trying to figure out what's best for the industry as a whole without, I guess, being almost punitive to individual companies or individual species up there. So it's been a challenge for the last 9 months for sure. NPIP inspections and audits, not doing any for the last 9 months and only having a 4-month break prior to that, in which I'm really glad we crammed as many visits as we did into that summer. But we have folks who are needing their audits and inspections, and so we're gonna have to probably make those go a little shorter than we normally would. So rather than doing a 1 or 2 day visit with one company, we're gonna try to do basically, in some cases, a couple of companies per day. And so we may go down to Southern Indiana and try to knock out 3 or 4, and we're just gonna have to meet at an office space or somewhere neutral like a restaurant or whatever the case may be, because we don't wanna break biosecurity between companies. So trying to see how many of those that we can knock out. Of course, we've always done our NPIP inspections, particularly the biosecurity audits, in person, and find great value in doing that. That's not required by the program, so we're probably going to have to take advantage of that to not go into operations and just try to do the paperwork. And fortunately, so many companies have had BCAP audits by us, so we've seen a lot of their facilities via FaceTime or in person as of recent. So it would feel very, very duplicative to say, let's go do a biosecurity audit when we've been on all these farms. And then the biennial meeting is coming up, so it'll be in Salt Lake City, Utah, August 11th through the 14th. Chelsea and I will go. Dr. Kopp, for those who know him, is getting a knee replacement at the beginning of August. So it's just Chelsea and I, and we'll join ISPA and lots of people from the industry to serve. Well, they'll serve as delegates, and we may or may not need to be an alternate delegate depending on how many volunteers there are from the industry. So looking forward to that. There were 28 proposed changes, which is really a smaller number. I think it was nearly double that last biennial. So actually glad to see a smaller number from the standpoint of just trying to get through them and establish Indiana's policy. So we met with ISPA and the industry over a couple of meetings to try to develop where our stance is on each of those. And I think we still have some research assignments on a couple of them, but yeah, nothing, none of the proposals were, I guess, super controversial. A lot of them were administrative and or updates for the laboratory. So if in the provisions of program standards it actually had which primer to use for, a salmonella identification or something, and that primer has changed, that was a proposed rule to update that. So there's a lot of those. One of them is to be able to use quality top instead of those old biochemical identifications for salmonella. So hopefully that will pass with flying colors. And there were a couple of different proposals about essentially changing changing the provisions such that if we decide to vaccinate some populations for avian influenza, that they wouldn't automatically no longer be an NPIP participant. Because as part of the NPIP participation, vaccination is not allowed. So we're going to have to amend it. And I think the idea is that, try to get ahead of it rather than being reactionary at the time if and when we ever do get to utilize vaccine. A couple of our veterinary colleagues from private industry went over to France recently, and they were sending me pictures of several different brands of avian influenza vaccine, and I was like, bring it back. BOAH does not have an official stance on vaccination. Realizing that we're being recorded, I think we've just, in our minds, and even Kyle and I talked about this morning, think that our outbreak in Northeast Indiana could have looked a lot different if we could have used vaccine for certain species to decrease shedding at the least. So I feel very jealous of those bottles of vaccine, but yeah, U.S. industry, we're not there yet. So. For trade purposes, essentially. And that's really all I have today. Yeah, there's my contact and my policies in, so that's great.
Any other questions for Dr. Cooper?
One thing I'll add as far as just perspective to keep in mind for Northern Indiana when we look at the cases up there and just the diversity of cases we've had. The numbers that we present are quite large and can be seen quite daunting, and they are a lot of work to do and get through. But I do want to acknowledge the hard work that the industry has done to continue to keep the other farms negative, right? We know this is a highly virulent virus that is incredibly transmissible amongst birds. And the number of cases that were positive, I say only very loosely, but only represents 25% of all the commercial poultry industry up in that Northeast Indiana. There's 2 or 3 counties there, right? So there are a lot of other birds that remained and continue to remain negative through this entire process. The 25% was a lot of work. And I'm not going to pretend it wasn't. But there's still 3/4 of the farms up there, and even those that went positive at some point, right? I don't want to discount the work that they did to, if they broke early on in the incident, they still put a lot of work in to remain negative afterwards as well. And so I just want folks to keep that perspective as we continue to have discussions, as we're around Indiana, around the incident of high path in Indiana, as we do have a lot of birds. And I do think our poultry industry and our growers are out there doing everything that you could imagine. Is it 100% of the time? No biosecurity is perfect, but they are putting in a lot of hard work to keep their flocks healthy and negative.
And again, from the poultry side, just want to say thank you, to everybody, because when the crisis happens in one species, then all the other species are teaming up together and making it happen. That line graph, it happens on holidays, doesn't discriminate if it's your birthday, anniversary, holiday, or whatnot. We're all in the first shift of the day, but I tell you what, there's emails that go out 11 o'clock at night, 1 o'clock in the morning, text, and even, and just thank you to everybody. And then it just shows the standard BOAH sets. This agency really sets the standard for all the other agencies. Just the teammanship, not only within BOAH, but with BOAH and industry, because it's very helpful. I mean, you were somewhat joking about that crate of chickens, but that is a serious thing,
Yeah.
and we need to know that. And when BOAH reports that to us in the poultry industry, that we get with our shippers, hey, avoid this area, and without divulging anything that's confidentiality and all that stuff, we just avoid this area, and that's been very helpful. There's some states where you don't find out it's your next door neighbor until the official announcement comes through, and it's just so frustrating. So Thanks for the hard work. I know there's times when it's frustration, door knocking. It's probably the second time you knocked on the door, maybe even a dozen times, but the way everything overlaps. So thank you.
Appreciate that. Thankful for the industry cooperation and speed at which, and we talk about speed and wondering if we're going too fast, but I feel like the euthanasia and depopulation can never go fast enough just to suppress that virus and protect neighbors and other flocks. And there was not one company during these 153 cases that approached that slowly. I mean, so many of them were the same night. We would ask, so when are you planning on starting? Because we had to have an event there. 10:30 or 11 o'clock at night. Okay. We never once were the holdup. Oh, it was never the holdup to Depop. We had been there every time. And we said yes every time. Now, we're worse aware because of it. But we did not want to interfere with depopulation.
Well, and I will say, on top of everything Ty shared, you kept up your, at least on the surface, good attitudes and creative problem solving. You know, we never got to a place where I saw that people were just like, oh, I just don't care. Well, I'm sure.
Yes.
But, you know, you were still trying to figure out new ways to do it, new ways to work with industry, you know, continuing to shift and adjust, and just really appreciate that teamwork. And while, yeah, it's been an absolutely crazy, is it 9 months, 7 months, 9 months?
Going on 10.
It would have been, it's hard to imagine it crazier, but it easily, as Kyle has just captured, it could have been much worse. So, and we appreciate all you did to keep our companies in business. In other states, they may not have been as cooperative, and we could be looking at bankrupt companies. Plain, and that is not an exaggeration of any sort. So,
For sure.
No, that's just pretty much fact. So having a state agency that protects our industry that way that is what good government is. Thank you.
We could have had far fewer cases if our only goal was to eradicate the virus.
Yes. Yeah.
Eradicating is easy, just don't raise
Yeah.
them.
Yeah.
We raise a
We're
lot
not,
of.
yeah, don't place, I mean, we could just stop placements, put in stricter controls. We could have stopped it. But yeah, our mission is to serve our companies who would like to stay in business.
Well, and that's some of the conversations we're going to start having on July 24th is, are there other things that we can do? Are there places where industry can strain themselves a little bit for a larger good? And see if we can strike that balance.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
It's needed for the lab too.
Yes, yeah.
And a piece that, you know, Dr. Cooper hit on with the B cap and not it's a sour point for a lot of us, with those biosecurity audits. But that came into place January of 2025. And prior to that, it wasn't a thing, right? And during this entire incident, we've had basically 2.5 full-time equivalents working more than full-time. And that's the only thing they did. And it wasn't even a thing prior to January 2025. So that's, you know, consuming a lot of our resources, our human capital, our most valuable resource we have. And I'm not saying it's a useless program. It needs some revisions to be more applicable broadly. But that's just a piece that you know, the target has moved as the incidents have occurred since 2022, and that's a new requirement that we are actively trying to navigate because it is a significant lift to ensure the business continuity piece of it all, right? That you can continue to move products in a safe, biosecure manner. So I just want to emphasize that a little bit for that perspective, because, you know, in 2022, ECAPs weren't on a thing. They weren't a thing, right? And, you know, to consume over 2.5, you know, full-time equivalents of our folks' time,
Which
That,
doesn't sound like that much, but like when animal programs is like 20 people.
right, yeah. I
It's
mean,
kind of a big deal.
and so it's one of those where you're like, okay, and again, when I say full-time equivalents, they are all working overtime. And so, that's a challenge to then redirect resources to try to cover the duties that those folks would have done otherwise, so.
I do want to add, the gratitude goes to ADDL too, very much so. Because I know Dr. Cooper or someone's calling you, you know, and especially when it's on a Friday evening, holidays, you know, people's personal stuff coming up, it's not easy to look at that person in the face, say, I need you to stay. You know, so it's, thank you to everybody at ADDL who made it happen too.
Yeah, there's a lot of people, including in industry, not just ADDL and BOAH, that have missed a number of family events, holidays. There's broken relationships. It's been a lot.
No, just Dr. Cooper, thank you to you and your team for being the point of this sphere on this. So, all right. Take a deep breath, please. Dr. Sir.
Hey, that's Carrie Sir, I'm the Director of Poultry Inspection. Thank you for having me today. I'm going to give you, I'm going to touch on a few of the quarterly highlights from this past quarter. We have had 2 new plants come on during this past quarter, and 1 plant left the program to go on the federal inspection. Dr. Swakowski, Dr. Shipman, and myself joined the Indiana Department of Ag, as well as a couple of our CIS plant owners, in hosting Robert Bean, FSIS Deputy Administrator, Field Operations, and Robert Whitty, FSIS Deputy Assistant Administrator, in a discussion regarding the Cooperative Interstate Shipment Program being able to export. We met with them the end of April. They joined us for dinners and a couple plant tours in Indianapolis of some CIS plants. And they unfortunately did not have any guidance for us on how to achieve the ability to export, but we are still continuing to explore different avenues to be able to do this. Under the Cooperative Interstate Shipment Program, our state inspected facilities have a joint, there's a joint venture with FSIS that enables state plants with state inspectors to be able to sell across state lines anywhere within the United States. And so we are thrilled to have this program, and this program, we have to prove that we are same as, the inspection is the same as the federal inspection. And so we do apply a federal legend, a round legend, that says inspect in the past. And the only difference right now is the ability to export. But we are still working on that. I also participated in answering questions regarding the meat inspection regulations with the Indiana State Health Department and county health departments from across the state on June 17th. This call was held to provide information about the House Enrollment Act 1424, the Homestead Act, which became active on July 1st. There are, as Gary explained, there are no changes in the BOAH meat inspection regulations under Indiana Code in this bill, but there is a lot of confusion still, receiving about 5 or more calls a week still from health departments as well as public to determine whether they need inspection from us or from health departments, what kind of licensing they need. And so we are working together with the health department to try to answer these questions, and so everybody has a clear understanding of what is needed of them. Dr. Swakowski met with the Southern Health Departments on June 25th to answer and field some questions regarding this homestead bill.
And James Noble, who is one of our, he's actually an EIO, an auditor for our program, as well as a compliance officer. So he met with, at a meeting hosted by the Farm Bureau, Indiana Farm Bureau, on June 26th. We do currently have 26 CIS plants. Over half of our plants that process only under inspection are part of the CIS program. This is no change from last quarter, although we have been working diligently to bring on some more plants that are interested. We did bring on 2 new inspectors that started over the last quarter. And we've had inspectors take advantage of the FSIS training courses. We have 2 more that completed training courses, enabling them to be inspectors in the CIS plants. We currently have 82 official establishments that provide inspection either for processing and or slaughter. We have 2 limited permit retail HRIs. That is an exempt poultry permit. And then we have 52 custom exempt establishments for a total of 136 establishments in our program. We currently have no open inspector positions. We do have 2 inspectors starting this month. 1 started last week. We have another one starting next week. So that will bring us up to a full workforce of inspectors. Looking ahead, we do have 2 new custom exempt facilities expected to join the program. Actually, one joined earlier this week, or early last week, sorry, after I made the report. And we have 2 plants that are expected to join the CIS program, one of which is going to be this month, hopefully. We have their initial setup for later this month. We still have a queue of about 5 other facilities wanting to join the CIS program this year. So we're working hard to get that accomplished. We are continuing to meet with other agencies. And our EIOs, our auditors, will help with trainings. Dr. Renee also has an extensive training program with all of our new inspectors on a weekly basis. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
All right, thank you very much, Dr. Sir. All right, Matt, you're up with your first
I'm up
dairy.
with my first one.
Yes.
Being the second to last one on the agenda, we'll make this short and sweet. We have a drive home. So just looking at the dairy division report, the highlights, the first bullets were surveys with and check ratings throughout the state in Q2. I want to look at that 94.4 enforcement score. That is a reflection of our staff doing the work, performing inspections, equipment testing, and then maintaining the records. So that's a very good score, average score for enforcement. And then in the fast facts, we have 37 farms, top one on the second column, with a total of 177 AMIs or robot milkers. We have 23 more coming in due to be installed between now and the end of the year. So put us at a total of 200 plus robot milkers in the state. And we also have 5 carousels being installed or have been installed in the next 3 to 4 months. So up in the northwest corner of the state, a lot of regular bulk tanks are being replaced with silos. One farm is a 30,000 gallon silo going in. So there's a lot of cows coming into the northwest section of the state. And looking ahead, we did sample silos this month for H1N1, and that went smoothly. And again, it was a lot less samples. So we're going to keep on working with that. And then outreach, Dean Adams, he's our inspector who samples all the dairy farms from around the affected sites for avian influenza, and then he takes them down to Purdue. So he'll go around to all the farms, collect samples, make sure there's nothing tracking back and forth from avian to bovine or milk to chicken. And is there any other questions on the report? Take them now.
Any other questions?
Silence is gold.
Yes, all right, thank you. Quick and easy and painless.
Yeah.
All right. Dr. Shipman.
Sure.
You're up.
So I'll just briefly do an update on New World Screwworm. I considered a PowerPoint, but then realized it'd be after lunch, and that's usually not a topic we want to see after lunch with some of the wounds involved there. But as Dr. Whirling alluded to, June 3rd, the U.S. had its first detection of New World Screwworm in Texas. The challenge that Texas has continued to see or saw was this detection was actually, 20, 30 miles already deep into Texas when they had that first detection. So as Dr. Whirling mentioned, 35 cases, 34 being in Texas, 1 being in New Mexico. We are generally seeing them in cattle. This fly typically feeds on living tissue. That's what makes it different than a lot of other flies that may like decaying tissue. But as its name suggests, it does screw into living tissue. That is its feeding behavior, which makes it relatively unique. But it prefers open wounds. And so generally management practices that cause a wound, so tagging, castration, tail docking, but also umbilicus after birth are really kind of the prime areas, as well as dehorning or disbudding. The prime areas that this fly takes advantage of when it's looking for its next host. So if you take a look at USDA's dashboard, which can be found on screwworm.gov, they will indicate that of the 35, 19 are active. I will caution you that that is a little misleading. So when USDA counts cases, this is different than how we count cases for other diseases. So cases for screwworm are individual animals, not premises impacted, right? So if 3 goats in 1 herd have been detected with New World Screwworm, that is 3 cases, not 1. So that's one thing to keep in mind. The second thing to keep in mind is as infestation zones, so different than control areas, but infestation zones are established around these positive cases. Those are in place for at least 3 life cycles of the fly after that case has been resolved. So the life cycle of the fly is around 21 days. So infestation zones are generally in place for upwards of 60 to 65 days at a minimum. So if you are interested or concerned about the status of infestation zones, I would suggest going to Texas website. They have an interactive website that has the infestation zones that are in place. None of them have been removed yet since the initial detection in early June. However, some of the cases that initiated those infestation zones have been classified as inactive because the animal involved has either healed or in some instances was euthanized. So just I want folks to keep that kind of perspective in mind because from USDA's website, if you just take a quick look at it, it can be a little misleading. The other thing we have done, or one thing that is different, if we compare and contrast to influenza to New World Screwworm, these infestation zones, instead of a 10-kilometer control area, it's a 20-kilometer infestation. So they are much larger. They also have an additional 20-kilometer adjacent surveillance area on top of that. So they can be quite substantial in their impact. So Texas is quarantining livestock species within the infestation zones. So if that was to occur in Indiana, that is a hell of an undertaking, right? It has hit some, while they have a lot of agriculture in Texas and no one's going to take that away from them, some of the areas that it has hit so far are pretty remote and rural. So it's still a significant number of animals, but not nearly the number of farms, right? If this was to be applied really anywhere in the Midwest, it would really look quite different. And really, once we get to 20 kilometers, we're really looking at the county level in Indiana. So just want folks to keep that perspective of what that could look like as far as infestation zones. The other challenge that Texas is currently working through is they have, they're reporting they have checkpoints, right? So they're monitoring vehicles on the roads in and out of these infestation zones. I think maybe the 12 or 13 current infestation zones in place. And so they are looking to ensure that animals, especially livestock, that are moving out of an infestation zone have met the requirements to move out of an infestation zone, which is that they have, generally that's going to be that they have been inspected by a veterinarian or a certified screwworm inspector, and likely have received treatment, either a treatment or a preventative prior to moving off their original location. So they do have folks in place to do those checkpoint areas, but how they're doing that, I'm not entirely sure, because that's an incredible lift to try to get that done. They're also surveilling wildlife. They're using some novel approaches. So they have several drones that are flying over to look for wildlife and to use heat detection to determine if they have a wound on them. So then try to track some of the movements of those animals to see, they're unlikely to get close enough to actually evaluate the wound, but to try to have an understanding of what animals that they need to maybe monitor closer that may have wounds in and around that area. They're also using a lot of trail cams to then take a closer look at some of these animals to determine if there is a potential for an infestation in those wildlife species. To date, they have not had a detection of New World screwworm in a wildlife species, nor have they had a detection of a wild fly in one of their traps that has been placed in and around these positive sites. That's a little peculiar, right? So we have, we have 35 cases in Texas. We've yet to find the wild fly in the United States, and we've yet to find an infestation of a wildlife species. And to date, they have, not that I'm aware at least, have they had any indication of animal movement on or off these infected prims. So these animals hadn't recently came from Mexico and then landed in Texas. That is not the case. And so obviously the fly is here in Texas, and they are working to mitigate that. What the USDA is also working to do is to increase our sterile fly production capacity with our partners in Panama, Mexico, and then domestic production as well. So as a reminder, the female fly generally only mates once. She can lay eggs multiple times, so it only has one mating. And the goal is to raise a sterile male fly so that then that mating with a wild type female fly would be unsuccessful, and then we stop the reproduction of that fly. So Panama is currently producing 100 million flies a week. Those are being airily dispersed across Central America, Mexico, and Texas. I think the last numbers I heard were maybe 40 million a week were coming to the United States in and around really the border and infestation zone. Texas has opened their converted facility. They previously had a sterile fruit fly facility that they converted to a sterile New World screwworm fly facility. And that is now in production with the goal of it being up to capacity, hopefully by the end of the year, which would be an additional 100 million flies a week. And then last but not least, in southern Texas, they have broken ground on a domestic New World screwworm sterile fly breeding facility. That is still going to be 12 to 18 months away before it's up in full capacity. but the goal is that it's producing 300 million flies a week. So that would get us to 500 million flies a week. And why is that the magic number? That's the magic number because that's how many it took the last time we've had to push New World screwworm out of the United States and down to Panama. It took about 500 million flies a week for it to overcome the wild flies and have a significant disruption of their that reproductive cycle. So they are actively working towards that. Obviously, the facilities that were used in the 60s and 70s had been shuttered. So they couldn't just go turnkey them and get them back into full production. So they're actively working on these new strategies. USDA is also funding a grand challenge to look at novel techniques of eradicating New World screwworm from the United States, including the potential production of male-only flies. So right now, of the 100 million, only half are usable because only those male flies are really what's impacting the reproductive cycle. So looking at potentially raising male-only flies, that's in the clearance process, as well as looking at novel technologies in the sterilization process of those flies, because it's pretty resource intense right now to irradiate those flies, and if they can find a different technology that would help facilitate the production of these flies. We are actively in Indiana working with the Office of the State Chemist to look at various products and the product labeling so that they could be used by veterinarians and producers for a environmental treatment of production facility. So some I would call them topical application, but kind of an environmental application of different organophosphates and other classes of products to prevent and treat against New World screwworm here in Indiana. So that process is through the state Office of the State Chemist, and they are working. I'm not going to pretend to know that process fully because that's a whole nother can of worms, but we are working through that with them. They are they have the initial process nearly complete, and then are working to get another label claim approved there. So we would be one of, I think, 5 or 6 states that have been able to go through that process. The border states, Texas, Florida, have already gone through this process, but we would be shortly there in line after to have that additional technical bulletin on that label, and it kind of supports those in our own backyard, right? So all the labels that are being reviewed right now are from Okanko. So they have seemed to have invested heavily in this space specifically, but really in South America, right? Because New World screwworm is found in South America. It's endemic there. And so some of the products that are getting approved by even FDA to come into the US to be applied to specifically cattle are these products that have just been marketed elsewhere and they've never gone through the entire regulatory process that have been approved in the United States because we did not have a need for them, and now we do. So USDA, FDA, EPA are actively working through that process. But like Dr. Whirling said, here in Indiana, we are actively encouraging folks to really hone in and focus on the reporting of unusual larvae or maggots. You can report an unusual fly if you can either catch it or take an appropriate picture of it, but we've seen some examples of how that isn't done well. So I would encourage folks to stick to the slow-moving items and submit those, because working with our team of entomologists at the Department of Health, they've been really great at identifying and screening those for us, and we can have a pretty timely response. Our most recent one being yesterday, right? So folks are definitely reporting those, and we're encouraged by that. As with most things, we prefer to fight a campfire as opposed to a forest fire, right? And that is usually due to early detection, a quick and nimble response. So want folks to don't hesitate to call, regardless of the species impacted, and we can navigate them through that process.
Last time screwworm was here, how far north did it go?
I don't actually know off the top of my head. Do
I
you
think
know?
it was just the Keys.
I think it was, the most recent,
Oh,
yeah.
most recent.
Well, most recent was 2016, and that was in the Florida Keys. In the 70s, 60s, 70s, I don't have that. One thing that is in our favor is this, in the reproductive cycle of the fly, it does spend time in soil, right? And it requires a soil temperature above 40 degrees to be successful and complete its life cycle. So we at least have we at least have a stop to it in our northern states. So if we were, and our highest risk right now isn't the fly, flying here. It's going to be on livestock or a companion animal moving it here on an open wound, and then potentially establishing, at least for a period of time, until minimally we'd have a cold spell and the temperature would get cold enough. So we do have at least kind of a bookend, but as I was sharing with Gary earlier this week, that would be unfortunately pretty tough, because then that could really bookend with high path, right? When high path's in the cold and New World screw in the summer, like that's not a trend I want to get into ideally. And so I did provide the updates in my report as far as what our entry requirements are. Those are based off of the USDA's playbook for New World screwworm, which is the goal with that is to try to standardize entry requirements across the country, with the understanding that 50 states are going to do it 50 different ways. But can we try to keep the themes as consistent as possible? And we've tried really hard to keep those themes as consistent with that national playbook. The one thing that we were quite cognizant about, and this is because of our history with high path, is we try really, really hard to recognize free areas as free. So if they are outside of an infestation zone or outside of an adjacent surveillance area, so that 40K, the rest of Texas is genuinely free. We try to recognize that with the assumption that the shoe could easily be on the other foot at some point in time. And we would really hope that other states would recognize the rest of Indiana, if we were to have a detection, as free to continue to move products. So that's probably the only caveat that is the most variable between states. Some have certain stipulations for infested zones, and then different stipulations for anything within a state that has an infestation zone. And we really didn't want to have that burden, that undue burden for our producers, and recognize that free areas are free. Any questions on screwworm or?
Is there any data from Mexico about cases tailing off on the southern end of this, like because of sterile flies or whatever? Are they?
So the challenge with that is, with the sterile flies, they've continued to have to move the dispersal polygon as it continued to move north, right? So they don't have enough flies to treat any one area. So as they continue to see cases creep north, because the Panama facility is a joint venture between the country of Panama and the United States, we, as the United States, could help dictate where those flies went. And we would always change the polygon as it was coming closer to Texas to try to put a biological barrier in place. So I think the challenge is no one area has had enough flies for a long enough period of time, because over the past 2 years, that polygon has just simply drifted and moved to try to keep on the front of that. And if you were to ask, fly experts, last year, we should have had the fly last year. Last summer, we fully anticipated having the first detection in Texas. And so fortunately, I would say they kind of prolonged that introduction for, maybe 12 months or so. But as far as the effectiveness in Mexico, we continue to see, we don't get them reported as often, but we get several reports of screwworm in Mexico, and the cases have definitely continued. The challenge Mexico has, and we've had this challenge across various diseases, is they don't have, their federal animal health authority have a lot of jurisdiction over the state animal health authorities. And the state animal health authorities have various levels of funding and participation. And so getting the surveillance data out of them is really challenging. And so that's been a big mission of USDA is trying to bolster the surveillance so we can at least know what we're up against. Because for some states, we just weren't getting any data or good data out of them, even though they could have had cases. And so they're really been working on the reporting structure and increasing those lines of communication. But I think the last I saw between Central America and Mexico since 2024 was 120, 130,000 livestock cases. And then 100 or 1,500-ish human cases. So, which is usually, it seems to be the kind of a socioeconomic issue. So unhoused, poor, elderly, vulnerable populations are generally more impacted, but yeah, you have enough food, you can have it. So.
That, you know, this fly has not moved on its own. The,
Yes.
you know, it's one of the disadvantages to our beef prices here in the U.S. The incentive to move those cattle from Central America, move them north to try and get them into the U.S. market and take advantage of that high beef price. Causing them to move by truck and other means of conveyance, and so that complicates this issue to be sure.
And that border, I think, fortunately has been closed for about a year-ish, about a year. And now it's basically closed both ways, right? So Mexico is no longer taking livestock from the United States. They will accept dogs down there. And then I got a notice that Canada just put, or Canada's restrictions are now basically livestock from Texas cannot go into Canada. So that notice came out today. So yeah, it's all the parts and pieces, all the movements of, you know, a global economy that we see that kind of complicate this. But having those conversations really around the production management events has been important. So around castrations, around calving, around disbudding or dehorning, those have been really critical times to make sure that they're evaluating that young stock because they seem to be more, say, susceptible to the fly.
Any other questions on New World screwworm?
Say that fast.
Yeah. Anything else? All right, I think the next thing we need to do for, or look at a couple of dates. We need to figure out a date to reconvene in August to bring the motion off the table, look at the capital building project for the ADDL and any other satellite labs. Our hard date that we need to get in before is the 14th. I would think trying to meet that week, knowing that the state fair is on, might be a little bit chaotic. So potentially looking at that first full week of August, see what everybody's dates are available there. Stick with a Tuesday, that'd be the 4th. Does anybody have any objections or holdups?
Even though it's a special meeting, we still have to have quorum here, right? We can have some virtual participation, but then the electronic meeting policy, we would have at least 6 people here in person. But everybody else can participate virtually. So. I'll put the CAP conference in Amarillo by virtual.
Okay.
That'd be virtual Tuesday.
They were you looking at?
I was just to stay with the Tuesday, I threw out the 4th proposal.
I may not be able to be on the 4th. I mean, I can do virtual, but.
Be virtual here. I'm out of town.
All right, with those that are out of town, does that go close to our 6th? Unless Dr. Hall can be here, or Dr. Armstrong as well. Are there other days that week that work, with everyone's travel schedule, or are they gone for the week?
Preferred for me is the 7th. I
Yeah.
think 7.
Well, Pat, it's the first day of the fair on the 7th.
Oh,
Yeah.
Okay, good catch. Good catch.
I was gonna throw that out there, Jackie. It's the morning of the ham breakfast.
Right, yeah. We could come in at 5:30.
Yeah, we can do it before that. The 6th could be an option for me. Dr. Hafford, are you back?
I'm good to see.
Okay, well, I'd be fine with that. All right, want to just put it down for the 6th, August the 6th right now. Dr. Hendricks, can you let that give you ample time to? Okay, thank you.
9:30.
Sure, 9:30 on.
We'll get a calendar invite set up. So.
Okay, thank you. All right. Next, looking to finalize the date for the October meeting. Right now, the tentative date is the Tuesday the 6th. Gary told me that due to calendar constraints, that's kind of limited on the days we can choose from there. So. Anyone have a problem with the 6th? All right, Gary, I think you can make it official.
Right.
All right.
Are we anticipating that there'll be a meeting packet come out for the special meeting or?
Stay tuned. I'm sure that's fine. Okay. I'll probably have an update on the agency budget in addition to the AD deal, so there may be some information. And we may try to do the approval of the minutes of this meeting. And so, yeah, probably have a little bit of information.
All right. Any other business that needs to come before we adjourn? All right, with that, I'll consider us adjourned. Everyone, keep an eye on your inboxes and mailboxes for